Hello, Dixon Ghouls. As you may remember, I was rereading this book, Guards of the Moon by Steven Erikson, book 1 of Malazan Book of the Fallen. I was doing a commentary as I was going along the book and reading it and, keeping notes. And I know these videos are too late. We're in the middle of February at the moment, but we had some very busy weeks and I was not able to compile all my notes together and film this video, so sorry for that. I still have not read, I haven't started the read of The House Gates. It is somewhere back there. I'm always confused with this stuff. So yeah, I was planning to do all these videos, compile the notes to the videos and then start this book, and probably start within the next 5 or 6 days, and also do some reviews of the books I've read in between. It's been very busy for the past month and a half, so I'm a bit behind schedule. What can I say? And I've got 4 other books to review that I've read since January. So yes, expect more videos when I find the time to do them. As with the previous video, I have to inform you that this is going to be a spoilerific review and there may be some spoilers for the entire series. So if you haven't finished reading, smash like, put this video in a watch later list if you have for the Malazan series, in order to watch it after you finish the series. If you have finished the series, tag along. This video will be long, but yeah, it's about me keeping the notes of what I was reading. And let's go to book 3, The Mission. And here we have a bit of shift from the Pale Front to the Darukistan front, and this is quite interesting. Much of Malazan is about the setup, the convergence of power. This part of the book does convey that exceptionally well. We start with chapter 8. We find the bridge burners, and Whiskey Jack is talking to the Moran support, and the Moran are quite interesting. I guess they're demi-humans. We're not quite sure what they look like, but they're allied to Malazan. They have their munitions that are explosives used by the bridge burners, so there are chemical concoctions, and the bridge burners are sappers. They have some flying machines. They're kind of like D&D dwarves with a bit of the more wind dog elves in here, because of the chitinous armor they have and their vehicles, and they're quite interesting. And in this chapter we learn that the alliance between the Empire and the Moranth is kind of rocky, and they're loyal to Whiskey Jack, but not necessarily the Empire. And also we learned that when they invaded the Pale earlier on, they killed exactly as many residents as Pale have killed their own, so they're very loyal. They're loyal to the letter of their agreements. They're quite intriguing. And I'm not sure we learn much more about them throughout the books. We learn some more information, but not much as far as I can remember. Meanwhile, we get a good view of Chaos via Quick Ben. He goes into the Chaos Warren and he meets Hairlock, who is going steadily into Chucky mode. He's in a puppet and he's murderous. And the party takes a fishing boat to Darukistan, and that's where we leave them. And on chapter 9 we see Tok the Younger, who everybody knows his father, Tok the Elder, and he's very respected, as turns out to be. And he spots an ambush and saves Jack Lorne from an ambush. Introspect, as I'm looking at the notes, it feels like an age, sort of. I read the book 15 years ago. I reread the book last month, and by now, as I'm filming this, the events from the early chapters feel like an age ago, and it's pretty dense, and that's something very hard to. It adds to the difficulty of reading Malazan Book of the Fallen, that it feels an ages ago. Actually, I was remembering 4 things from Guard of the Moon from my first read. We had the possession of Sori, we have the battle with the Moonspawn in Book 1, and we have the Battle of the Rooftops, which coming later, and then the scene with Paran and the Hounds, but I was not sure if it was Guards of the Moon or Memoirs of Ice. Oh well. And we also meet another awesome character, Tool, the Tlanimas Onas Tulan, who follows Jack Lord, and once we get to know him, he is an awesome character. Doc and Lord get to Pale eventually, and we also have this sort of bromance between Doc and Tool that does not quite pays out in this book, and it's a shame because they're so great together. So we get to Pale, and here we have a big argument between Teisren and Dujek, since the records of Pale's nobles were accidentally destroyed. So Teisren cannot kill 9 out of 10 of the nobles, as Malazan tend to do. So yeah, there's a lot of intrigue and struggles inside the Malazan army, and it's a shame we don't see them in this book, because there's a whole book to be written about the Pale Front, but it's just a background noise, I guess, or setting up the later books, which is the same. And then we have a big dinner with Dajek, Lorne, Teisren, Tok, and Tattersail. And we learn that Lorne has an old grudge with Tattersail since she was responsible for the death of her parents when she was a child back in the Mace Quarter incident that happens during the prologue. So there's another callback to the events of the prologue here that we didn't know about. And after that, Par and Tattersail come clean about his mission, his ties to Lorne, and then they sort of bang. I mean, I was telling you that Crocus does not have the worst romance with Chalice, because there's Par and Tattersail. I mean, it's worse than instant love, and here we have love in a can, like, oh yeah, I'm in love with you, so am I, let's bang. And you know, Tattersail and Paran have this crazy PC energy. It feels like the players looked at each other character sheet, they saw each other charisma score and say, oh well, you've got high charisma, let's bang. Or maybe the player playing Tattersail and the player playing Paran were a couple, and at some point they broke up, and the Tattersail player left the party, as we'll see in a while. So after the bank, Tattersail leaves for Darukistan, believing that Lorne is there trying to kill the bridge burners. And then we go to chapter 10 with more intrigue as Tok and Paran discuss that Lorne is not only there to find Sori, and they decide to go after her. And Paran's taking the sort of red pill at this point after he died and was saved by gods. And as this is happening, Tattersail is traveling through her warren, but Tool is blocking her warren with his. So she has to exit, and she exits and is challenged by Belurdan, one of the other surviving Cabal mages. He tells her that he was researching a Jagut document. There's a tyrant buried underneath the Rukistan, and Tattersail realizes now Lorne is not going to kill Whiskey Jacks, he's going to release this thing, and this is really bad. But yeah, he doesn't go back. Belurdan is adamant that she should follow him, and so Tattersail goes all out on him. You see, Belurdan had a lover who died in chapter 2, sorry. So Tattersail has sealed her remains into a sack so he can bury her. And now Tattersail is using a spell and opening her warren despite the strains is under, so they both burn. They're both killed, both Belurdan and Tattersail, but the tyrant has sold to the remains of Belladon's beloved. And so, parent adversarial romance, yeah, I think we're going into a worse love story than Twilight territory here, because it's the skeletal remains of a woman. And seriously, the whole adversarial thing is overcomplicated and gets weirder still. But then again, we have the threat of the tyrant coming in, and this puts some urgency to the novel, since we have a clear event coming and it's dangerous for everybody. Meanwhile, Crone and Culloden Brood are also seeming, and it seems they are not cool. They're sort of against Anomaly Rake, and Brood decides to protect Crocus, the coin bearer, from Rake, to keep up on outside of the events, not to get involved. And as Crone returns to Moonspawn, Sherlock jumps out of a war and tries to take her out, because he has gone full psyche at this moment and he is burning Great Ravens. And at this point, in Guardians of the Moon, the book is about many factions fighting one another, as well as their members conspiring among themselves. So we have chaos, everybody's against everybody in a way, and we have alliances and friendships forming and breaking. And many of those scenes play out in some capacity throughout the book, but not all of them. Many are set up for later years by Steven Erikson. And that was a sort of a short part, and it's time to go to book 4. Book 4, Assassins. At this point we have left Pale for good, and the plot now moves solely to Darukistan, or the hills outside, in the next book. But this book is Darukistan focused, so things get somewhat streamlined. Chapter 11 begins with Krupe and he's in a dream, and in this dream we have a ritual where Tattersale is being reborn as a rabbit child, and now the parent Tattersale romance has gone into Breaking Dawn finale creepiness, so definitely a worse love story than Twilight. I'm sorry, but the Tattersale parent love story is pretty weird. And yes, the parent events are definitely weird, as we see later in this book, and more importantly in Memories of Ice and onward. But before going into his dream, Krupe has identified that the crew of road workers in Darukistan are Malazans, which is strange, and Sori, who is part of the road crew because they are the bridge burners, bearing explosives throughout Darukistan, notices that Krupe noticed them and warns Zigzag, and then she follows Krupe to the Phoenix Inn. Of course, Krupe notices her because Krupe is the secret badass, favorite trope of Erikson's, and he has a thug stop her, but of course she kills him easily. And Crocus spots the body outside the Phoenix Inn and tells everybody. Then he notices that Sori has a bloody knife, and she notices that he bears Opon's coin, so she targets him. Or maybe Cotillion does, because he is possessing her. Also, before this happened, Crocus meets his scholar uncle, and we have a big info dump on the Zagutarian, where it is, the story of it. And yep, his threat is keeping the novel flowing at this point because of a ticking clock, and one faction wants to unleash something ungodly on this city and destroy everything. And the Zagutarian is set up as a threat very well throughout these books, these chapters. And at the same time, Callum and Quick Ben are trying to find the assassin killed in Darukistan. Says their plan, because they want to employ them to take out the cabal of mages that control the city. And despite the struggle, this does not stop Quick Ben from crossing the Warren of Shadow via chaos, and he wants to speak with the Shadow Throne. And as this happens, in Phoenix Inn, Cole tells the company, including Krupe, that he saw 5 black dragons fly from Moonspawn. So in chapter 12, Krupe visits Crocus Angle Mammoth in order to read about the crippling and chaining of an unknown god. Yes, the crippled god that we will see later on. And there are multiple cripplings and chainings of his. And the inhabitants of Moonspawn, the 5 black dragons and the red one, Selana, who helped in this chaining, are mentioned. There's the funny bit about it when Krupe is expecting to read of his grandmother's name happening there, and I'm not sure if this is a dig on how verbose some fantasy books are about names, or it's just Krupe being Krupe and playing the goof to have people not notice how he's pulling those strings from obscurity. But let's be very clear about something, because we Malazan fans do a huge disservice to Steven Erikson, because the way we describe Malazan Book of the Fallen makes people believe it's a super dark, super grim, super dark book full of names and events, and Steven Erikson can be very, very funny. But we focus on this. It is hard to read, mostly because it is, but it's funny as hell. I mean, he has this Liber-like humor, and I haven't been watching much of the Malazan content that is coming out this year due to time constraints, but I happen to watch rough Blue Text's longer rambly videos, not the Malazan one, some others. And he was mentioning how the Langmar stories, the Grey Mouser and Fafet stories of Fritz Leiber were a huge influence on Terry Pratchett and Steven Erikson. And yeah, I would say that it's not as much of Lieber's influence on Steven Erikson, but it's Lieber's and Vance's influence on Dungeons & Dragons that influences Erikson to write this way of the negotiation, of the talks, of the banter, of the bonds between adventurers and disparate characters, and a lot of the cliches they created, like the Assassins and the Thieves Guild, are used in Dungeons & Dragons extensively. And this is why we see them here, because I don't see many Liber influence in Malazan. There's definitely some world-building stuff that are used, like the way gods work. They're clearly from Langmar books, but I think this is the D&D influence. Because let's not forget, the Malazan world starts a D&D campaign setting. But enough with that, stuff gets more complicated, because Crone meets Baruch and informs him that a mad puppet is following someone to the Gadrobi Hills, so Baruch realizes that somebody is going to raise the tyrants and things are going to get very bad, and he doesn't say anything because he does not trust Rake yet, and Crone is pissed, so we have a lot of infighting even between those alliances. And meanwhile, in this chapter, we have Quick Ben and his balls of steel getting into Shadowkeep, and Shadowkeep and the Warrens were all very impressive. I have to give that to Steven Erikson. He knows how to make his magic feel magical. So he has negotiation with Shadow Throne, and he strikes a deal with him simply because Shadow Throne likes deals. So he says, I'll deliver Herlock to you, to the Hounds, because he attacked them, and in return I won't be killed because I'm a renegade Shadow cultist. And turns out he was a head priest of Sadu, Delat, who escaped the cult, and Shadow Throne is pissed. And Baruch is meeting Krupe again, and he sends him to the Barrow of the Jagud to spy on it, and he says, take your guys from Phoenixine as well as the coin bearer, because Baruch does not know that Crocus is the coin bearer. And as this happens, Sori, who suddenly feels Quick Ben magically, and finds him and Callum tells them that there are assassins in the Phoenix Inn, and Callum goes there to strike a meeting, and Quick Ben is realizing that the reason why Sorry felt him is because he is possessed by something out of Shadow, because it was his link to the Shadow Warren who informed her of that. So things get complicated. And chapter 13 is no less than that, because Callum and Quick Ben follow Rallick Nom. He is leading them to a trap, believing they are the ones killing the assassins, and then 11 assassins drop from the sky and a huge battle begins. And as with every other action scene in this book, it's also awesome. It's not as much CGI extravaganza as other fights, but at some point Rex joins the fight, and Quick Ben and Callum escape by the skin of their teeth, sacrificing a demon that Quick Ben had somehow with him. So they get back to the Bridge Burners, who, yes, let's be honest, the Bridge Burners are a Black Company fanfic. I mean, just reading the way that Fiddler is playing cards with the rest, it's so Black Company, it hurts. If you have read Black Company, you realize that, yes, that's it. And yeah, they realize that Tisteanti is taking out the assassins, probably because Anomonderake knows that the Malazans will try to hire the assassins to kill the leadership of the Rukistan as part of their modus operandi. And Sorry is following Krupa and Crocus, and decides to follow Crocus as he is breaking back into the Darla estate, and he wants to return the things he stole to the maiden who stole his heart. And Chalice sort of like turns down his advances, and the guards set an alarm. But Sorry, who for some reasons keeps thinking that there is a seer involved but does not know why, kills one of the guards, and Crocus sees her following him, and he's spooked. And to close the chapter, and in book 4, Rick and Baruch meet and have another uneasy conversation, and they form some sort of an uneasy alliance between them. And what's really great about book 4 is that at this point the book has gotten kind of streamlined, because the plot lines are getting more together and there is a convergence coming. Malazan Book of the Fallen is not about your ordinary fantasy novel about a hero on a journey. Instead, it's about setting up the world and showing us what is happening, and sometimes the setting can get too much, and the setup of different stuff happening, especially as many of the things that are set up are going to pay off later in the series, not in this book. And I have to be honest with you, these two books 3 and 4 of Guardians of the Moon, were a struggle to read because of the many things set up and the many different settings and the lack of clear plot. However, the 3 other chapters are more fun because we get the Jagut Tyrant plot as well as the intrigue in Darukistan and how it pays off. Alright, book 5, the Gadrobi Hills. At this point we have entirely left pale and the plot is getting tighter and tighter. Okay, chapter 14. Let's get something straight. Tool is a total badass, and throughout the books we'll see more of him, and he's even more of a badass there. I remember that. I remember Tool is a badass, and that should tell you something because I'm very bad to remember things. I'm looking some of the notes and say, when did this happen? I read the book last month. But after 5 years I finished the series, after 15 years I started the series, I still remember that Tool is a badass. What really helps is that he's a great character and very, very deep. And I started the previous video, the video about book 1, with Steven Erikson being a lot like Clive Barker. and I stand by that because of Steven Erikson's monsters that are deep and human, more human than human, I would say. And human characters can be a bit shallow, not as impressive, but I guess there's a point to that. And I think that much of the depth of those human characters comes from being old. They have so much experience, they've seen so many things, there are so many eons they've gone through, and this depth conveys that, and that's amazing. Those immortal characters do feel immortal. They feel they have lifetimes of experience, while the mortal characters are still trying to find out what's happening with them, and that's really interesting. And if you're ever going to write immortal characters, you should definitely read Steven Erikson, because he's doing the trick. And his dialogue in here with Lorne conveys so much of his experience, of his pain, of the weight of centuries on him. And it sets up the Jakku Tyrant as a huge threat. And also it gives a lot of a bit of lore about the origin of the Tisteandi and about the Jakku and the Tlanimas, and I really want to go and read the prequel novels as I was reading this. And I guess I should do it in I'm not sure I'll do it this year, but probably the next year. I'll go and see if I can find the other books as soon as the bookstores here open, because yes, we're into the lockdown, bookstores are not open right now. I mean, I can always order them, but what's the fun of that? What's the fun in ordering stuff off the internet and somebody brings you a package of books? It's no fun. What's really fun is going out in the wild and hunting for books, and especially I like hunting for second-hand books because of the thrill of the hunt. Alright, enough with that, but I know it's not. I know which bookstores have these books, I guess, so I'll go and get a ton of them. I'll treat myself to those books, as many action books as I can find in this bookstore I have in mind. And as we have this very deep, very heavy conversation between them, we get to the Phoenix Inn crew, and they're a fun bunch. They're sort of cosplaying as mercenaries, and it's hilarious because Cole, who is drunk all the time, he's wearing a full knight's suit, and he's on a horse. The others are mules because Krupp bought them mules. He was too cheap to get them horses, and there's so much character building. I mean, we barely know these people, and just by seeing of them interacting, we understand so much about them, and Steven Erikson is really good at that. I complain about how he's going deep into some characters and they're in their monologues and this can get frustrating, but he is excellent at is the characterization about that's the character like, and you get it. And here we have another example of that, because it's of those characters who mostly know their names and their occupations. They shine just by interacting with one another, and that's great. Of course, Sori is on the trail, and the entire book is on the hills outside of the Rukistan. So, this book is sort of split by territory, in a way of sorts, and each book is happening in a different place or as we transition between places, and it puts some order into what is happening, but at the same time it also breaks out the momentum. I mean, I might have preferred a more approach like a Game of Thrones and a Song of Ice and Fire, where we have characters and their arcs happening at the same time, and we have a steady influx of information. I'd rather have small chapters of characters as their arcs progresses throughout the book, not having blocks of one place or another. if I'm clear. I haven't heard Steven Erikson say that, but he was on a live stream and said that he was too critical in the early books, and I get that. I really want to see how he deals with that later in later books, with the character approach. I think in The House Gates, he is about following different characters and their arcs throughout the book, but then again I have to read this and I'll tell you when I read it. Okay? Lord and Tool find the burrow and they camp for the night after Tool says that let's rest. Yes, I complain about the inner monologues in Malazan Book of the Fallen, but here we have Lorne in a moment of pure brilliance, because he says that the good tyrant became human. That was his fault. He became human and he wanted to enslave others. So the reason everybody fears the good tyrant because he became better than a human in enslaving others. And that sets much of the grimness of the entire series and its philosophy. And it's not a nice philosophy, not a nice world. Let me tell you that. Yes, there is humor, there is friendship, there is love, there is hope, but there's also pain and suffering. And enslavement. I mean, the big bad, he is the crippled god, a god who fell on Burn, the equivalent of Earth in the Malazan world, and got crippled and chained by the other gods. And much of what is happening later on is because of his pain and suffering and his need to take vengeance. So in a way, that's a good tyrant is a sign of things to come. And to be honest, the way she talks about that, about the nature of humanity, kind of makes the upcoming Karsa long sequel, which destroys civilization, actually makes Karsa feel heroic because of that, believe it or not, because humanity is cancer. Meanwhile, we have Tuck and Paran, who are stalked by Herlock, and they're on the trail of the adjunct, and lots of stuff is happening, because Quick Ben is magically trailing Herlock at the same time, and in chapter 15, Herlock jumps Paran Tuck, he throws Tuck into a warren, we won't see him for the rest of the book, but as this is happening and Herlock is about to kill Paran, because Paran stopped him from possessing the hound he lured in, Quick Ben alerts Dancer through Sorry. Meanwhile, Lorne meets the Phoenix in crew and she attacks them out of the blue. We have a fight and it leads to Cole and Lorne getting injured. Krupp and Murillo get knocked out and Crocus calls for a truce. Lorne says okay, because he realizes that she didn't have to attack them. And one reason she won the fight so easily because she is having an Otatara sword with her, and that sword is negating magic, so Kruppe cannot access his warren. And so we don't see how Kruppe is, how powerful he is. We'll see later on. Just stay there for a while because Kruppe is a badass. But without his magic, he is kind of useless. And Sorry is about to kill Crocus, but at the same time, Herlock is tossed to the hounds by Quick Ben. He casts the strings and the puppet falls down, the hounds come in and they tear him limb for limb. Some justice is done. And then they're about to attack Paran, but here comes Nomodrake to save him. He kills two of the hounds with his soul-sighting sword, Draglipur, and then Silverthrone comes and he agrees that yes, this game is getting too hard for him, and yes, he cuts his losses, he gets out of the game for the Turkestan. He yanks a rope out of Sorry. So at this point, Paran realizes what Tatrasail's divination meant, and let's go back to chapter 1, the opening scene for chapter 1 with Ringa and the Fisher Girl and Ringa's prophecy. And she was describing the events as they happen up to this point. Paran touches the body of Dead Hound and he gets transported into the warren of Dragnibor. There we have a wagon where victims of an Amandrake are chained to, and they're forced to yank it for all eternity. So that's a grim fate. And being there, he summons Sopon, and that allows him to free the two hounds of South that were killed by Rake. And as Crocus is taking care of his injured companions, he finds Sori, but she's not possessed anymore and she's kind of in a loss and barely remembers the last 2 years and how she got there. And Cole tells him that your uncle Mammoth is a scholar and she was clearly possessed by something, so get her to your uncle, he may know what is happening with her. So by chapter 16 we have two main events happening at this point. We have Lorne, who is getting killed fast because the Tetheral swords he has out of her. Tetheral makes people heal easier, I guess, since getting mutated or something. And she and Tool enter the burrow, and the way that Erikson describes the burrow of the Jakku Tyrant is great. There is a sense of mystery and wonder to seeing this part with the ice and the way time stops for the Jakku Tyrant. Meanwhile, Paran he meets a Revi tribe and also their incarnated Tatarsail, who is already a young girl, and this is kind of interesting because he knows that she's alive and they will meet again. So yeah, Tatarsail is just, the plot line with Paran. Tatarsail is finished for this book and we'll go there later. I think in Memories of Ice and onward we'll see more of them. Meanwhile, Crocus is taking Sori back to Darukistan and he is developing certain instant love for her. I think the Crocus is the eternal romantic or something, and he easily falls for a girl. What can I say? Was set up quite well with Chalice, to be honest. It makes sense that he's a 16-year-old kid who is a thief, and they talk for a while. Kruppe and Murillo follow behind him, having left an injured Cole, and Paran stumbles upon him. There is a sort of tension between them, but eventually they grow to be friends, and we learn about Cole's past, about his marriage. And okay, I may complain about Steven Erikson's romances, I get that, but the dude can clearly write a bromance, because in this scene we have initial mistrust that turns out to be respect and friendship, and yet there are a lot of great bromances in this book. We have Tool and Talk, we have Kruppe and Murillo in a way, how they bond. We have Quick Ben and Callum, and in a little while we see Whiskey Jacks and Dudek's bond. They're great examples of bromances. So at this point our heroes are moving all into Darukistan for the final 2 acts of the drama.